Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Olsson. I'm one of the production directors here at REIMAGINE 2020. Welcome back to another edition of REIMAGINE 2020 virtual events, where we showcase some of the leading developments in the blockchain and cryptocurrency industry by talking with those who are actively building and conducting business within the space. And importantly, where we also get to showcase some of our onboarded university students from all around the globe to highlight some of the up and coming talent in the space. This is our fifth event. It's been quite a ride up to this point, and this one is themed Happy HODL Days, where we are, of course, playing off the crypto meme to HODL, or hold on for dear life, and where we want to celebrate the holidays and a successful year, in my opinion, for the crypto world in general, here at the end of the eventful year, which has been 2020. So with that said, what we want to do this time is, in addition to hearing about some of the exciting developments that are taking place, we also want to get a sense of this year in review from the industry leaders that we have the pleasure to talk with. In case you've missed any of our previous events, be sure to check us out on our YouTube channel, REIMAGINE 2020. And of course, be sure to follow us on all the relevant social media channels, Twitter, Instagram, at REIMAGINE_2020. Lastly, be sure to check out our podcast series on Spotify at Bitcoin Radio, where you can hear all previous and future interviews to date. Joining me right now is a very cool guy from our short interaction before we started recording here, David Moss. David is the founder and CEO of StrongBlock. StrongBlock is a blockchain protocol designed to reward and reinforce the expanding blockchain infrastructure. And they're a company that offers blockchain as a service, and they're now contributing to the DeFi ecosystem. Lots of things going on. David, thanks so much for joining me today, man. How are you? Where are you in the world? And what are you excited about generally in this space right now?
Hey, Tyler, thanks for that great intro, and lovely to be here. I really appreciate you having me on the interview today, on the show today. I am currently in Los Angeles, the greater Los Angeles West Coast area, where we're about to start shutting down from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. If you haven't heard about that. What I'm excited about, and it's not that, I don't really see why that's a big deal, but in Los Angeles, a lot of people go out at night, and maybe that's where spreading is happening. Who knows? What I'm really excited about is the really big resurgence in crypto in general. And I think that that's helping a lot of things. We had blockchain, all the big ICO stuff happening back in 2017, 2018. We had kind of the crypto winter is almost like the Game of Thrones crypto winter, like winter is coming, and it lasted a long time. And now it's just really cool to see all the interest in things. DeFi is something that we'll talk about a little bit more as we get into, but that's the thing that really has helped a lot of this. But I think that there's also just regular interest. When you see Bitcoin going over 16, 17, 18,000, by the time that this broadcasts, it's quite possibly will have breached 20,000, and gotten it to an ATH. So I'm just really excited about where we are, because a lot of us have kind of had to wait for people to get excited again. We've been excited the whole time. Now we actually get to say it in public.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've found to be really interesting this time around is, first off, how incredibly bored people who have been in it for a while are, despite the fact that Bitcoin is approaching new all-time highs. But also, one of the things that I think may contribute to that is, let's go back to 2017, right? You see that you have this parabolic move on the entire market, right, within a couple months. And it seemed like it was mainly retail, in the sense of it was sort of people like you and me and the mom and pops and, your sister and, right, your cousin, whatever, people that were kind of FOMOing in without sort of really a fundamental understanding of its implications on like monetary policy and just, personal finance and what have you. But I think now, would you say that sort of this move that we're seeing is coming on the tail of all of these really big institutional investors. Like, for example, you see, Michael Saylor out there advertising that he's moving, 100% of the treasury at MicroStrategy into Bitcoin and not any other assets, right? And you have billionaires and other people, in Mexico. I mean, do you think that that's what's driving this next push right here?
I think it was a number of different factors. I think that DeFi helped lead the way for it to a certain extent, but I don't really think that was as much of a factor for Bitcoin. I think that one of the big things that started the whole surge here was PayPal. And PayPal's announcement, and now you can actually, you do things with Bitcoin. Now you don't actually get, it's kind of Bitcoin light in a way, because you don't actually get custody of the Bitcoin, which is an interesting way to do it. But at the same time, it certainly hasn't stopped it from being just an exciting thing that, it's going to be embraced by institutional investors. So you have, as you said, private individuals, very wealthy private individuals, whales of any kind moving in, whether or not they're institutional investors. Everybody's starting to look at this. Listen, there's only going to ever be 21 million of these. There's what, 7 billion people on the planet. There's a finite amount of them. It's the only non-inflationary coin out there. Almost everything else has some form of inflation associated with it. And I think it's just the right time, especially looking at all the other things where the economy seems to be propped up by the printing machines of printing several trillion dollars in not just the United States, but in any country in the world where they're doing a lot of propping things up. Bitcoin and other assets like Ethereum is actually doing pretty darn well right now too. But all crypto assets that have some underlying value or have some underlying value proposition seem to be all of a sudden okay. And I think that that's the whole idea, is that they weren't okay. Everybody was saying, well, gee, I don't know if that's ever going to be a good thing, and it's not really real, and it's vapor money. Those same people that said that, by the way, bought Bitcoin a lot. And that's a classic move, right? The classic move is to go out there and FUD it while you're going out there and buying it. So
yeah,
I think there's a lot of factors. Yep.
Yep, because you need that liquidity. So someone's got to be buying and selling.
Yeah, it's a zero, ends up being a zero-sum game, and so somebody's got to buy, somebody's got to sell. So
yep, and there were a couple things. The first thing I was thinking about is really when you start to understand that it all boils down to basic elementary supply and demand principles, right? Where, at least in the case of Bitcoin, right, you have a fixed supply, right? So the supply can never increase, but the demand can, right?
Yes.
And then, when you see people coming in, whales that are sort of working with, large amounts of cash, right? You start to think, you go, oh my God, I need to buy as many of these things as I can before they increase the price because they do a market buy of, 400 million or whatever. But the other thing that you mentioned was PayPal. I too agree that that's an extremely bullish event for the space at large, right? That, people.
It was a signal. I think people are looking for signals, and that was a signal. And I think it was for me, it was one of the most powerful signals that's been sent out. It's like, okay, here's just an organization that we're used to using to be able to send money back and forth. They're embracing it. That's a big signal. It's probably an easier to understand signal than Goldman Sachs going long on Bitcoin or something like that. For the regular investor, I think that's what did it, but it's driven across the board. And I think that that's great. And that's from the point of view of cryptocurrency being accepted and used as a payment mechanism, as a store of value, because it's basically, it's both. Bitcoin is a terrible payment mechanism, especially now that it's approaching $20,000 per Bitcoin. The transaction costs and the speed and everything else are just not tenable. But that's what we're looking at: store of value, payment method, and then it's a way to seamlessly do transactions across borders, across companies, and to be able to create ecosystems where all of those things work in a much more efficient manner than they worked before. And we keep talking about this. We've been talking about this for years, through the 2017 wave. I was going back to where I was, let's see, this is 2000, oh my gosh, it is 2020. This time, 3 years ago, I was getting ready to launch the first testnet for EOS. Mm-hmm. And that was what I was working on. I was the head of development at Block One. And
Yeah.
and my team was building the EOSIO software, and we were getting ready on December 4th. We launched that testnet. So there wasn't even an EOS 3 years ago. And you know, depending on, there's a lot of different opinions on how successful it was, but I can tell you the software itself kicks ass. It's great software. It gets rid of a lot of the transaction fee issues that Ethereum has. But I look at the evolution of those things, and there's some things that have changed and some things that haven't. And a lot of that depends on, well, what are the development cycles for things once they've been released? And this is where we get into things like Ethereum 2.0. Well, great. So there's an announcement about Ethereum 2.0, right? There's 16,384 nodes that they're looking for. They want to collect about 32 ETH per node to get people to participate. And this is for ETH 2.0. Now, when I was working at Block One in 2017, it was like, well, you know, ETH 2.0 is going to be coming out anytime. Okay, well, this is 3 years later. And the engineering cycles to be able to make a change. There was another proposal as you're probably aware, called, I think it was, I can't remember the exact number, but it was a proposal 1559, geez, I'll have to look that one up, where that one would dramatically reduce gas costs for Ethereum, but they couldn't both do that one and do ETH 2.0. And so some of those things are folded into ETH 2.0. The point I want to make here is that this is all software. And the thing that's been really hard for people to grasp, that just, you know, you and I work in both of those levels. We understand the blockchain component, the software, but there's also that, and there's the cryptocurrency part of it. The cryptocurrency is used as a transactional mechanism inside of the software, but the software has to be written. And wow, there's a lot of things that I've done enough software cycles, and, you know, started off at Oracle Corporation, worked at several other companies and built them up. Software takes a while to get done. And if you're going to do it right, it takes a while to get done. And everybody seems to think that, well, we can just snap our fingers and there's new technology. And so what a lot of the things that you're seeing is people are trying really crazy experiments in things, in DeFi and other stuff, while you see Ethereum on the separate track going, well, wow, we've been working on this upgrade for 3 years, and it's, you know, maybe 4 years, and it's going to eventually be there. And oh, you put your ETH in now, and a year from now, maybe you'll be able to start getting your rewards from the 32 ETH that you staked. That's a long time for software to get developed, but that's how software in the enterprise level and that gets developed. So I think we're seeing this real interesting speed up, buy Bitcoin, buy Ethereum, and all these other things, and then we're seeing this slow down. Well, let's make sure this software really, really works. Make sure that everything is in there that allow us to grow. But those cycles are so disconnected from each other that people expect that, oh, because now Ethereum is worth more and Ethereum's 2.0 is coming out, all the problems are solved. And it's nothing. We have a long ways to go in blockchain software that is the core of everything that controls cryptocurrency, that generates cryptocurrency. We have that's the beauty of this right now, is there's so much more to go to be able to just control it and govern it.
Yeah, and like, you know, you bring up a lot of really good points about how, at least in the public eye, you know, people focus on Bitcoin, right? Like, you know, all of my friends and family who are more unfamiliar about what's going on in this space than I am, right? It's all Bitcoin, or like, what's the thing that you do with Bitcoin? But what they don't see, largely for no fault of their own, other than the fact that they may not have the time to go and investigate it, or they're not exposed to it for whatever reason. But what they don't see is, as you were mentioning, that there's this whole industry underneath the king, if you will, which sort of purports to be building out softwares, which are going to have like monumental implications for the way that sort of we handle our identity, for the way that we communicate with each other, for the way that we maintain privacy and have ownership over our data, right? In a world which is pervaded by the internet, right? Everything that we do is on the internet. And so it's like, we're just now finding the first iterations of a sort of reworking of that architecture, which is sort of going to meet those needs. And you had mentioned, you know, people complaining about, you know, the concurrent Ethereum 2.0 development, right? Saying, oh, what is taking so long? You know, I don't know if you're familiar with Charles Hoskinson and what IOHK is doing with Cardano, but one thing that he's always sort of throwing back at the haters, if you will, that are talking about the delays, is he's trying to say, look, first you have to notice that these softwares are, purporting to work magic at the level of industry, right? Like, things that NASA can use reliably.
Mm-hmm.
But secondly, it's not just that NASA wants to use this or, insert whatever big name, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just that they want to use this and for it to be reliable and secure and for it to not break, right? But you want this to last, right? Like you have to have your sights out 50, 100 years into the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is all to say that these things, right? These things are not to be rushed. So for all of those people who sort of may have their qualms with the sort of patience that these developers take in trying to build out these protocols, right? You have to zoom out and you have to see really what the big picture is. Okay,
Sure.
that's just what I wanted to say on the heels of what you were saying. But let's just go back, because there's a lot to unpack there.
Yes.
You had mentioned that before you had worked on developing EOS. And a couple other things that you had ventured in. Why don't you sort of in a more pointed way walk us through your background? Where did you come from? How did you get involved in this space in particular? And then that can get us into maybe you saying a little bit about StrongBlock.
Okay, well, let's see. It's kind of like that Neil deGrasse Tyson thing where it shows the last teeny tiny little bit at the very end. We're in the last 12 seconds of the current universe. So let's see. I was a professional musician a long time ago. And I was also, I did that right out of high school and into college, and was going go to medical school, and decided that I liked computers and computer science way the heck better. Much to my parents' dismay, because they were a family of doctors and wanted me to become a doctor. What I did then was I was lucky enough to get a lot of really good experience. I think the first major thing that I did was at Oracle Corporation, and so worked as a principal consultant for the consulting division of Oracle, and built a lot of really great software there. Some of the projects, we did projects for people, but we also taught. My specialty was what's called entity relationship diagramming, and basically ER modeling for large data constructs where there's 200 or 300 different data constructs that you've got to be able to put together and build systems around. That was Boeing 777 project, I think, was the biggest one that I worked on. And actually the planes are up there flying, so I guess we must have done something right. And went on and worked at a number of different companies, projects, was the founder of Edmunds.com, founder and CIO of Edmunds.com, which is an automotive resource that's still around. Was one of the early .coms, and was lucky enough on the crypto side, CTO and CEO of various companies, was lucky enough on the crypto side that I met a number of people while I was CTO of different companies that got me into crypto. Several different people introduced me to Bitcoin literally when it came out. And I just dabbled in it, traded it, but I wasn't really sure about the software side. But starting 4 or 5 years ago, I started to really get pretty serious about the software side of it, and was lucky enough to get introduced to a group of people in Los Angeles, Silicon Beach people, and there were a lot of the people that founded a lot of the companies. For example, the co-founders of Tether, and a number of other different things that are staples of what we're doing right now. And I was able to do that with work with them on a number of different projects, and I was a ghostwriter for white papers, doing all sorts of other things while I was being a regular technologist, building software for all sorts of stuff. But that was my claim to fame, was getting things done. And so somebody came to me at one of these events. There was a bunch of people. I was a private event, and said, I need to introduce you to this guy, and his name is Brendan Bloomer. And I said, I know who Brendan is. He's the CEO over at Block One. I go, yes. Well, I said, well, I have some questions for Brendan, and I'll keep this short because I don't want to keep saying the same story each time. But basically, I was told by the person who introduced us that you need to work together. We needed to work together. And within a couple of days, actually a couple of weeks, I was working with Block One, and almost exclusively at that point. I had a couple of other white papers I needed to do, and some token design. And so did that, ran development. I was the employee number 2. Dan Larimer was employee number 1. And a lot of our conversations were done back and forth over a peer-in, which is we use kind of the precursor to people using Zoom. And he has a very big staff now in Blacksburg, Virginia, but I brought in people that I knew could get stuff done. We got stuff done. We released the EOS.io software. I left right before then so I could be independent, because it was very important at the time for legal reasons for Block One not to have anything to do with the mainnet. And so I left right before the mainnet, and I ran I was one of the leaders in a large community that helped launch the EOS mainnet. There's a whole bunch of other people involved. I can't take not even multi-credit. There's so many people that were involved in that. But I was lucky enough to be somebody who helped coordinate that whole effort. And the idea behind Block One was to build the EOS.io software. And beyond that, they weren't quite sure what they wanted to do, but they had some things they were going to work on and improving the software. My ambition was a little bit different, which was I wanted blockchain to be adopted. And so what we worked on was StrongBlock. I took the group who I brought in with me, and we started StrongBlock. And the goal was to create a blockchain infrastructure. We started off with blockchain as a service, literally a push button system that allowed you to be able to create your own EOS or Ethereum blockchain. We were working on a couple of others at the time that we started putting that on the back burner. You could do an EOS.io blockchain ready to go with all the things you needed in 3 minutes. That's how long it took. And 3 minutes to get an entire blockchain up and going.
And when you say that it's a push button to get an entire blockchain up and running in 3 minutes, what sort of features were built into that? Did it deploy a token for you? Did it have?
Yeah, you could create your own token name. You can decide how many tokens you wanted to create with it. It created all the smart contracts, the entire blockchain. It got the blockchain up and running and starting producing blocks. And it took you, if you accepted the defaults, maybe 30 seconds to a minute to enter it in, and then about 3 minutes for it to generate everything. And then you could go to our marketplace, grab different templates that had already been built, and get your own blockchain application up and running. We had thousands of people that did that. And we started looking at the next step. And this is where the evolution of StrongBlock is. We looked at the next step, and the next step for us was, well, we need to have, we were creating all the nodes. We were building a marketplace that allowed you to bring in your own nodes, or we could have a marketplace full of independent third-party nodes. And it turned out that nobody was really solving that. They were always doing it for one specific blockchain, and they weren't rewarding nodes. And oh, guess what? Did you know that Ethereum nodes are not rewarded? Now, Ethereum miners are rewarded with Ethereum for mining, but Ethereum full nodes or archive nodes, their total annual compensation is 0. Mm-hmm. And so we started looking at how we would compensate them. So that was kind of the next big thought process that got us, on the next path.
Sure. Now, maybe for those who are listening that are not familiar, when you say a full node or like an archive node, what does that mean? And maybe you can sort of describe it in such a way that
sure,
it sort of seems worthy of a reward in the first place.
Okay, well, so in most blockchains, there are different types of nodes. Some that are just actually writing the blocks into the blockchain. And those are the primary nodes, and that's their job, is they get information, they write it, and then they send it out to the other block producers. In EOS, for example, it needs to go to 20 other block producers, and they all certify it, and then, yep, now it's written on and certified on the blockchain. If you are just a full node, you keep a full node keeps an entire copy of that chain, but it's not actually writing blocks. But when you're looking at a way to find information, you'd go to a full node. There's also what's called a light node. So let me describe this. A light node is literally a copy that has it doesn't have a full copy, and if it needs more information than a certain amount of information when it's being pulled, it goes to a full node that has an entire copy. If you want an archive node, it has a whole bunch of other different kinds of transactions, and you use that to be able to grab information. So they are the place that everybody, let's just talk about Ethereum right now. Everybody goes to these nodes for information. What happened about a week and a half ago? Did you hear about what happened with the blockchain within Infura?
Yeah, it sort of went down, and it was a problem because they were like a massive node.
Yes. And so, yes. And so what happened is that ideally, the way that Ethereum was designed, and you can go out there, I'm actually writing a paper on this right now. It's going to be published in the next couple of weeks. You can go out there and the whole idea behind Ethereum, and having done this early on myself, you create your own what's called a Geth node, and you bring it up yourself, and that's where you do everything to interact with the Ethereum mainnet. You use a Geth node, but you create your own node because they thought, well, everybody's going to be able to do that. It'll be so easy.
It'll take 2 weeks or something.
Yeah. Well, again, we know that right now because it takes a while to do this. It is a technical thing. We're actually working on making it so you don't have to have any technical expertise. But what happens then is that within Fura, what happened was very simple, is that the thing that we've been saying to keep the internet, especially the Ethereum mainnet running, was you need lots and lots of nodes that have correct copies of things, and they need to be as diverse and decentralized as possible, because guess who relies on their data? MetaMask, which is probably the #1 way that people interact with Ethereum on smart contracts. Guess where they get their information? They don't go to their own set of nodes or a set of decentralized nodes. They go to Infura. Binance goes to Infura as well. What's the problem with that? Well, Infura is really, as far as we can see, really not a collection of thousands of nodes. It's one Kubernetes node that has a whole bunch of things spinning off of it, off of one data center. And maybe there's multiple, I don't know, I don't even want to guess, but they had not updated their software. And something happened where something needed to happen and the update didn't happen, and they hadn't updated it in some period of time. And so there was literally a hard fork of Ethereum. When I say hard fork, I mean that there were starting to be two competing versions of what the Ethereum mainnet was. That made it unusable by MetaMask, and MetaMask wallets all of a sudden stopped operating. That made it unusable by Binance, and all of a sudden Binance couldn't get information on all of its ERC20 tokens. And so the entire idea of a node is to have lots of them in lots of different places so that none of them can ever go down, and you can always have another copy in another place. Because what we did in that instance, Binance and MetaMask, that's as centralized as you can get. And so the whole idea, we were talking before we turned on the recording here about decentralization. And what we really want is decentralization so that it can be unstoppable. And it was stoppable. Yep. And what we're working on, we have built a whole series of nodes that people are compensated to provide, and with the strong token. And what people get from that is that you can go out there and pick any one of those. As a matter of fact, what people did when Infura went down is they went to our website and they chose one of the nodes, and they simply switched their MetaMask over so that it could use one of our endpoints, and bam, MetaMask was back up and running.
Right on.
And so that literally, we couldn't have had a better test case. It's like somebody literally drops a gift in your hand. So it's
yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're building out a useful tool. Now let's just, let me try to track where we are up to this point. So a blockchain protocol has to process a bunch of transactions. Those transactions get published to the entire network, right? And you need a series of nodes, right? You need certain participants on the network that are holding a copy of that sort of transaction history, right? And you noticed that people who are just holding the information on a node, right? People who are merely running a full node, who are archiving that history, aren't being incentivized to do so. And so in order to, I guess, sort of overcome the problem that you just sort of detailed for us with Infura Fura going down and, many big players not being able to sort of retrieve the information that they need. In order to keep that from happening, you said, okay, what can we do to incentivize more people to, at the very least, run a full node? So that you never have to worry about that information going offline, right? And so you said, maybe if we figured out a way to sort of pay people or to sort of reward people for running a full node, we would have more of those nodes online, thus preventing the problem of, the history blacking out or something.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and ironically, when this happened in Fura, and again, I don't want to point the finger at them because a lot of people had this happen. They had older copies of the Ethereum software. The nodes that are on our service, that's part of their qualifications. They've got to be running the most recent copies or the most recent stable copies. So we were actually, by providing that service, we were actually a more reliable place to go. And that's the reason that we felt we needed to provide that well before the Infura thing happened, was that if you aren't, there's nobody holding you accountable for keeping the most recent copy, the most recent version of the software, making sure that you're up to date, that you have good response time. Nobody's doing that. And so what if we provided incentive for them to do that? There's no incentive for people to keep up. I said the irony, though, is that in Fura, they had every incentive in the world to have the most recent copy, didn't. And that caused, brought up the single problem of centralization versus decentralization in any blockchain.
Yeah. So are y'all offering something like a plugin? I mean, do people go to your website and then they have to, how do they start one of these nodes that can generate rewards?
Two ways. One of them's coming, and I think by the time that this airs, which I think that this will be fairly safe to say, but one way is you create a node and then you apply, and you have to have certain things with your node that we're able to then automatically check and make sure that you're up to date. And then once you're approved, then you're on a list of those nodes, and then people can use those nodes as endpoints. The other way is we're actually creating a system, a service. We already had blockchain as a service. We're creating nodes as a service. And this, again, I'm hoping that this is going to come out in the first week of December. At that point, we'll have announced it. But and I don't want any people front running any of this stuff, but we are working on building that so that there's a way for you to create one, so that my sister, who's actually fairly technically adept, but probably wouldn't ever want to do anything, I could give it to her, and she's literally just, again, enters 2 pieces of information, pays some Strong. They're using Strong to get the node running, and then the node, we create everything for you, and it's ready, and it's out there, and it's available for people. So it literally takes minutes, or even down to seconds, I think. So that's the 2 ways that people do it. Is then we have a reward system that's based on a number of different factors, on your performance and other things like that, that allows people to be incentivized to provide a better ecosystem, such that we don't have those kinds of outages. That costs, I have no idea how much money it cost people during that period of time, but that was, imagine Wall Street going down for, I think it was 6 hours when Infura was down 6 to 8 hours. Imagine, the NASDAQ going down for that period of time. So.
Right. Now, you had sort of couched this in terms of, centralization versus decentralization, or the sort of virtues of decentralization when it comes to distributed systems. Now, incentive for a archiving node is one thing, right? Incentive for a miner is another. I think that sort of one of the things that comes to mind for me when we're talking about decentralization and incentivizing the participants on the network to sort of maintain the integrity in various ways, whether you're a miner and you're keeping it secure, or you're just running a full node to make sure that the history stays online. Is there, what's your philosophy on this sort of relationship between decentralization and governance models? Right?
That's an area that I think both of us are very excited about. I think that the issue with centralization, just for me, the contrast is one organization has all of the levers to turn on, turn off, to pull, whatever. And that means that you are at their mercy. I would say that that applies to a lot of different things, Facebook, Twitter, other things like that, where you can use the platform, but if they have the ability to mute you, to cancel you, whatever else they need to do. So that's a centralized system. As much as we like it it has its own set of its own economy. A decentralized system in one is which no one person gets to make that kind of a decision, and then either one of them still has to have governance. And by governance, I mean a set of rules by which a particular system is organized and held accountable. And the issue with centralization, which isn't a bad thing, is often that it just means that somebody could cancel you overnight. And that happens all the time. People get their accounts deleted, they get their accounts suspended, they're unable to do something, and you have no recourse. On a decentralized system, the challenge is, how do you make the rules that allow a diverse set of people to still be, there's a famous saying, it's that government exists because people aren't inherently unselfish and kind. And so that's, you can argue, well, that's not the only reason government exists, but people aren't inherently unselfish and kind. They want to look out for their own self-interest. And so a decentralized system, meaning that no one person has control. Perfect example, who's the CEO of Bitcoin? Well,
there isn't one.
There isn't a CEO of Bitcoin. Why is it so valuable? Because there isn't a CEO, and there's a limited supply, and it gets harder and harder to be able to attain it. It's a beautiful system that no one else has really been able to come up with a solution for. It may be the all-time best solution, and who knows what Satoshi was. But that's a system where the governance is basically by a set of rules that happens over a period of time that were decided by whoever put it together. And those rules are immutable. You really can't change them. You can fork it. You can do what Roger Ver is very, connected with Bitcoin Cash, right? BCH. And he's the big proponent of Bitcoin Cash. You can fork it. You can do all sorts of other stuff. But ultimately, in a decentralized system, you and I have to decide in advance that when it's like a legal contract. If you and I are working, I'm trying to think of the simplest way to do that. We're in a neighborhood, and we're in a neighborhood co-op or in an apartment co-op, and each of us has an apartment in the co-op, and there are a set of basically homeowners association rules, and I've seen some of them that are this thick, just huge sets of rules, and those are the bylaws. Well, you have to pay. First of all, probably the number one is you got to pay your homeowners association dues. That's, interestingly enough, that's the biggest one that they have. That's usually the number one thing. If you don't pay that, everything else is kind of null and void, and we can go and seize your house and sell it and give everybody else the money. But the other rules are more subtle, like, well, do you all agree that you can't paint your doors any except 5 particular colors? Now, somebody decided that, but you can have enough people who can go in there and vote and say, well, I think we need to add green to that list. And so it really becomes a matter of, well, how do you govern something that is a collection of people that are trying to cooperate in some way to get a particular thing done? And so with a blockchain and with governance of any kind, you have to have some set of rules. The difficulty, and this is the thing that I really admire that Vitalik Buterin has said several times and recently, is that governance is kind of a slow process towards a better decentralized system. It is, and I'm paraphrasing, it isn't wholly sprung out of your head that you know exactly how everybody's going to react. It's like any product that you'd put to market. You put a product out to market and you think, wow, I'm going to put out this new product and it's going to be a pen and it's going to be the coolest pen and it's going to have a flash drive in it and everything. And the market may say, nah.
Yeah.
So until you get your product out there, you don't know how it needs to be governed. And if you have a system that thousands or millions of people are all using, like a blockchain, you don't really know when you get it out exactly how it's going to be used and how it's going to be perceived. And so you have to have the ability to govern parameters, allow people to participate in a meaningful way, and be able to make changes over the course of time that maybe become a bit more rigid over the course of time because they've worked so well in the past, but not so rigid as to prevent you from moving forward or lock you up so that now you're literally helpless and you're in some sort of a deadlock. Look at democracy. I mean, so democracy is the perfect thing, right? Governance, that voting systems, electoral college, all sorts of things that the states can do that have control over the federal government. It's a whole bunch of interlocking rules that, as we've seen, that we're watching now today when we're recording this, and hopefully will be resolved by the time this is published, but maybe not. It's messy as hell still. And how long have we been around as a country? And where did we get it from first? We got it like from all sorts of other different things. We wrote a bunch of cool ideas in the Federalist Papers. And where are we now? We're still having problems with it. And so blockchain governance, people expect that that's going to be ready overnight. And of course, we'll get everything right. Well, guess what? I think you said this earlier. We're humans. We're imperfect. Our blockchain systems are only going to be as perfect as we are and as perfect as the software can be, which is highly imperfect. And so governance now for me is an evolving system in which you create a number of things that you can pull the levers on, that you can have a group of people decide, oh, well, why don't we change this over here? And we all agree that we're going to change it. And then let's see what happens. And so then the group helps move it forward, and they have to have something at stake. Maybe they have to supply tokens that shows that they have proof of stake or something along those lines. That's really where a lot of this is going, but it takes a while to get there.
Yeah, it really is an interesting interplay between the notion of decentralization and governance. Because when you were talking, I realized that I had never really thought of the sort of initial rule set which enables a system to become decentralized as a kind of meta governance, right?
Yes.
Which sort of allows it to sort of, as a system, right, grow and become distributed, which then further enables participants on that system to make amendments to these sort of more, circumscribed regions of the code that sort of undergirds the network that they are participating on.
Yes, well put.
To sort of go back to your example with Facebook, I think sort of you were right to kind of end up at talking about democracy because it's just as true in the case of using a social media application, right? Those are communal spaces, right, where we sort of dwell with others, and all of the moves that you can make on Facebook or on Instagram, Twitter, right, those are partially dictated by the sort of rules that are laid out in the software. But there's also these norms that you have to abide by when interacting with other people. And in sort of what is so important about decentralization is that it sort of preserves the kind of democracy that we value to have in those kinds of social communal spaces, right?
Yes.
And this is why you see people, being up in arms about, a very select few people censoring others, or sort of, purporting to know what the truth is, or sort of shutting down conversation, which for all we know would have unfolded in a quite diplomatic and rational way or something. So it's important that people realize that cryptocurrencies aren't just about, making money, right? But as we were talking about earlier, it's an entire industry of people that are really trying to think hard about the notion of decentralization, its relationship to democracy, and just how you implement that into code or into software that sort of we interact with on a day-to-day basis, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, one last example that I'll give as to why this is actually like an important issue to think about. Look at centralized bank currencies, right? That's a really good example of how you have a small group of people, right? A centralized entity is able, right? They have a monopoly over the kinds of decisions that are made around that currency like the US dollar, for instance. So if those people decide against the wishes of other economically informed people that are sort of users of that currency, if they make the decision to print that money and print it more, then you effectively end up with the consequence that maybe not everybody who is participating in that network agrees with. So this comes back to why it's so important to have it in a blockchain protocol, namely why it's important to have governance figured out, is because it allows people to engage in a democratic process when it comes to those kinds of economic decisions or whatever else.
And they may not even always be economic decisions. It could be something where the group decides that this person is going to be censured. There are all sorts of societies and cults and tribes and everything that have all sorts of different rules of engagement. And so that's really the thing that underlines all the cryptocurrencies, is that the blockchain, the cryptography software, the chain of blocks that's put together, the cryptographic chains that are put together, but ultimately, and then the people that verify that, yes, these are working. It's a ledger that's repeated in a number of places, so it can't be interfered with or rewritten. But then it's like, well, what are the rules? And so the rules, even in a large system like the United States, are needed, even with a constitution and all the other stuff that was put together and all the thought that went in it. Wow, it's flawed, because we are, and we're not going to ever have it right, but we can start off with a certain set of governing principles. Again, with Bitcoin, we're following Satoshi's lead, right? He decided this is how Bitcoin would be ruled, and there's a halving every 4 years, and there's all these other things that are going to happen because it's going to get that much harder, or be twice as expensive to be able to mine for Bitcoin, all the other stuff. Those were his rules. So ultimately, he still controls it because it was the original idea. Whether or not he even liked it that way, that's now how it's playing out. Who knows how it would play out here, 11 years later.
Right. Yeah. And that's where you get forks, because if people don't like it, then they just go off. But, we could maybe get into this in a minute, but there's other new innovations in the space with, proof of stake, on-chain governance and whatnot, where you don't end up with all these multitudes of chain histories. But to sort of stick on this idea of governance once more, StrongBlock is right. They're trying to contribute their share to the DeFi ecosystem. What sort of how is that how does the incentives that you're trying to give nodes and sort of what you're doing with DeFi? Is there anything that the token, is there a token? Is there a governance token that you're sort of working with? How are y'all working governance into the project?
The token itself that we have so far, and we're working on several other tokens that will be part of the ecosystem, but the primary token that we've put out so far is for governance. And that token is one token, one strong, one vote. And then there is a whole governance system that allows you to make changes to the protocol. And there are a number of levers in the protocol. You have to have a certain number of strong that you can use to propose a change, and then a certain number of strong that you can use to be able to vote. And no one group, we still hold more strong than most people, but that's not going to be the case here within the next couple of weeks. But the idea is that you can use that to propose a change, and it's a software code change. You say that we want to change how rewards are given out, or we want to change the way that inflation works, or we want to create a new pool, or we want to add a new different kind of thing that we're doing. We want to reward Bitcoin nodes, not just Ethereum or Ethereum 2.0 nodes. Those are all governance changes that are set in code, that by a code request, you make a governance proposal, and it has literally, our governance proposals are software proposals. You're saying, I want to make the following changes to this. We have a template that allows you to do this without being a developer, but I want to propose these changes, and then you can go out there and have people vote on them and vote on the proposal, and then and if you get enough to get the proposal going, then vote on the change, and then have the change actually become law, right? It's now the new code. The code gets enacted, and now all of a sudden there's a new pool called the Bitcoin pool, and then people can start putting things into that pool and being able to get rewards from it. So the way that we're looking at it for us, governance, this is a governance it's a governance experiment, but it's governance in action. We really believe in that. Now, early on, we have more strong than others, but we haven't sold any of our strong up to this point. We have more strong than others so that we can make some of these decisions better than, not better, but easier than other people can. They'd have to get a lot more things out there. So early on, we wanted to make sure that the protocol had a safety net.
Sure.
Because the last thing we wanted to do is have it be run away. As a matter of fact, the first 3 weeks of our protocol releasing, it did kind of get out of hand, and we had to go in there and make some governance changes in order to reduce the amount of inflation and make some other changes. So, but governance for us, that's the key token. So Strong is a governance token. We'll have other tokens that are non-governance utility or NFT and other different kinds of tokens like that will be used in the ecosystem. But we're big believers in practicing what we preach and continuing to have this governance portion evolve so that people can make decisions for the protocol without us being involved going forward.
Sure. I like that idea of one strong, one vote. So is it that somebody offers a proposal and then any holder of strong can go and then deposit any amount of strong into a smart contract, and then it
Yes.
is there like a threshold where if it gets above that threshold,
Yes.
then it deploys? Or
Exactly. And so those are governance parameters that allow you to propose and to have it voted on, and you have to hit certain thresholds of the number of people voting, and then the positive. Right now, it's a simple majority if you have enough votes overall that have participated.
Got it.
And you can, again, that's also alterable as well. People can decide that it needs to be a supermajority
Sure.
over time. Again, look at all the rules that are in the House and the Senate for bills and everything else like that. There's different kinds of rules that apply to different kinds of situations. But these are relatively simple, small, enclosed ecosystems. It's like those jars where you have like plants and earth and everything living, and they're hermetically sealed. And they're I saw one the other day with some guy's got one that's been growing for 40 years and he's never done anything. Just a terrarium in a glass, right?
Yeah.
And so right now, a lot of systems that have a cryptocurrency are relatively small ecosystems, and you don't need hundreds of different points to govern on. You need maybe a dozen points to govern on, and you can flip those levers up and down or move them back and forth, to up or down, and you can pretty much keep the whole thing working without a lot of additional intervention.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about case studies where this kind of governance model might not be appropriate or where it could run into problems. Like what I have in mind is certain protocols allow people to stake with a pool operator, right? And those are the technical people that are really, sort of like unbeknownst to the stakers, right? Those are the ones that are voting on the protocol amendments that get proposed.
Sure.
And so this other slightly different model where any holder can sort of go and put a vote in a smart contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where once the threshold is met or sort of surpassed, it will deploy whatever change is in that proposal. I sort of wonder, what kind of changes would, I guess, hinder the system if they never got enough votes, because let's say the sort of holders aren't paying attention, right? They're not.
You've hit on the single biggest issue right now in voting of any kind. Although in the United States, this last couple of weeks, we've seen much more participation than we've had in a long time. But you're talking about voter apathy. And right now in blockchain systems, voter apathy is almost 100%. Or we could say voter participation is almost 0%. And so what we created, and we base some of our governance on a protocol called Compound.finance, Comp. And Comp had some really nice things in there. The thing that we borrowed that we really like, or that we emulated that we really like, was the ability to delegate. Mm-hmm. And we really strongly encourage people, if you're not going to vote, you don't lose your tokens or anything, but you can say, I can say, Tyler, I'm going to give you, I'm delegating my 2,000 strong to you. And anything that comes up, I trust you to make the right decision. And this happens with proxy voting in organizations, corporations all the time, right? People don't show up at the annual Berkshire Hathaway meeting. They send in their proxy votes and they say, well, whatever this person, the proxy that represents 5% of the votes, whatever they vote, then all these proxies are being voted by that person. So we have essentially a proxy or a delegate system that allows you to do that. And that we believe that will help lessen apathy. We just simply have to say, you don't even have to vote on all these things that keep coming up. You just need to say, I'm delegating my proxies to somebody else. I'm delegating my votes to somebody else. And then you get, then what you do though is then you're creating essentially an electoral college, right? Because if there's 400,000 strong outstanding and somebody's delegated 100,000 of it to me, I've got one heck of a presence. In making anything, I can vote things up or vote things down, but that's the way that a lot of systems work. And so we don't have a throttle on how much you can delegate right now. And that's one of the things that we're talking about for a governance proposal as we get further along. What if somebody delegates it all to one person and that one person crushes anything or decides to change the protocol so it only gives out pictures of lolcats, as lolcat memes, and that's the only thing that it dispenses anymore. And you don't get strong, you just get a meme, and that's it.
Yeah. And, I guess it says something if you're already holding strong, which is itself a governance token, right? Maybe maybe it's just that you wouldn't find yourself holding that token if you were the apathetic kind in the first place, right?
It would be lovely to think that. What we see in practice is most of the tokens that were issued in DeFi were governance tokens. The actual voter participation is near zero on any proposals. And I think that despite the fact that ours as a governance token is designed solely for the purpose of governing the protocol, and that's why it's there, and you can get rewarded with that so you can participate more in the protocol over time by being there longer and gaining more influence. It's basically, it's still when Lambo, when Moon.
Yep.
and again, now we get back to the dichotomy, right? It's or the paradox. It's the paradox of crypto, is that you can carefully design a system over many years and have it so that it has all these wonderful governance principles and all these other things. And somebody can say, it's up $2, time to sell. Seriously. So that's always going to be a paradox in blockchain until we get to the point where we've made voting more obvious, easy, and affecting your personal outcome. People don't see it as affecting their personal outcome. And so most people that are trading in crypto simply want to say the same thing. It's well, is it up? Should I sell? When I was a day trader at one point years ago, and I day traded crypto and done that stuff too, just to keep on top of all these other things that are going on. And you can set all these things automatically. I can set I can do futures. I can do puts and calls. I can I can set my limits, my limit orders, so I've got stops and everything else. And you can just have that all automatically done. And you can just go and just have it send you a message. Hey, I just sold some. Your bot just sold some for you. And that's how a lot of people trade now. And so there's no thinking in there about the decision that they're making about the protocol itself, even though some of the decisions that are being made by others could end up making it so that they are unable to do anything. Here's what they say. It's great, well, I'll just go to another protocol.
Yeah.
There's thousands of them out there. And that's what they do.
Yeah. And that's actually I think that sort of one of the greatest things that came out of the sort of libertarian undertones of the whole space is that that there is a sort of coexistence of different protocols, right? And it's sort of just the concept of open source, open access, right, is really where it's at. People can come and go as they please. It's a permission. Well, most of these are permissionless networks, right? So as you say, it's hey, if it turns out that unbeknownst to you, people voted on gas fees going to 80%, whatever, the value of your transaction was, then that pisses you off, then okay, then I'm going to go over here to this other protocol. And
they can vote by their vote is them walking away.
Yeah. you can vote by going to another system.
Yep.
Yeah, I love it. And
While it's too easy to do that right now, participation and adherence and loyalty to any particular system is limited to people that understand the underlying philosophy. We initially came out and started saying, well, we're DeFi with a purpose. So the purpose is we're actually rewarding nodes. Most DeFi things, we're just rewarding you.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the difference. And so the loyalty that can come over time is you get more people that are interested in building that ecosystem and providing some sort of a good or public good or a benefit. And that's, I think, where DeFi is going to be heading, is that it's not just, well, what are your actual ridiculous returns that you can make for 24 hours until you get rug pulled? It's instead, what is the long-term benefit that I'm getting from this? And that's kind of like eco-investing and all the other things like that. There are a number of different groups out there that have really great ways of having you I would say eco-friendly or just good investing. So you're not investing in things that you wouldn't normally do as a person. And so I think that that's where with DeFi, you don't even know it. Just basically somebody created a token, et cetera. Now I think it's much better. There's a lot of things. We think that we're the start of that next part now of DeFi, which is people are actually they have the DeFi components. They can put things in, they can get some rewards out, they can play and do different things in it, but ultimately they're supporting something greater than just that, getting the money and getting the money out.
Yeah. This is actually really a very humbling conversation, because it goes to show how we're still facing perennial issues that human beings have been thinking about for a long time, right? And it's not as easy as, okay, right, the Bitcoin fixes this meme, or, crypto will fix this, or, let's just chalk everything up to decentralization. No, I mean, everything that I hear you saying in our conversation here, at least as it pertains to this idea of governance, is that there are complicated issues that really need to get figured out, all the way from the technical aspects of how you sort of implement governance, whatever that is in the abstract, but also you have to master a certain understanding of human psychology, right? And sort of like knowing how an incentive actually can function as an incentive, right? How you can actually get an ecosystem to thrive by right, sort of letting people see that their participation in the governance process is actually relevant to them, and it's relevant to the other people in the community, and so on and so forth. These are perennial issues. So it's very humbling to think about it in that way.
Tyler, we've just made things very much more complicated for our audience, and so we can probably boil it down to crypto currency is something that on the surface, yes, you can just trade, and there's plenty of different ones to trade out there. At a certain point, you'll start wondering, well, what exactly good has it done in the world that I did that besides I made money? Which everybody asks themselves at a certain point is what good am I doing in the world? And I think that that's really where governance is going to start coming in.
Yeah. Maybe we can shift gears here away from governance. It's been a lot of fascinating insights, and it's interesting to hear what y'all are doing. You kept mentioning Ethereum. I know that y'all are an ERC-20 project. Is that correct?
Correct.
So do you see any challenges that y'all will face, or that I guess any project in the space faces with the migration to Ethereum 2.0 on the horizon, if it ever gets to a point where you're going to see these projects migrating over? Is that anything that you're worried about? Or
no, as a matter of fact, I embrace it. I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to be a lot longer than people think, and like it's been quite a while. Right now they were looking at the December 1st deadline for Ethereum 2.0 to have 16,000 plus nodes and everybody contribute, and then they lock things up and work on the next version. Whether or not you'd be able to really run transactions on it and move apps on it, and how does proof of stake work and all those other things, those are kind of yet to be seen. The big thing that needs to happen with Ethereum right now is that it goes at 15 transactions a second maximum. Bitcoin goes at maybe 3 to 5 on its best days. And that is not how fast any other monetary system goes that's being electronically traded or electronically sent. And that has to be solved. It's also very expensive because the way that Ethereum was built with the gas system, there's a whole bunch of mathematical operations. Gas is simply a breakdown. You can go look this up. Simply a breakdown of all the different mathematical operations. And each mathematical operation has a certain amount of expense associated with it. And the more that you have, the more expense you have, then you also add into, well, you're driving from where I live into downtown LA at rush hour. So it's going to be more expensive if you're using a fast pass or something like that to get there, because you're also encountering heavy traffic. The problem that Ethereum has that groups like Polkadot and EOS have tried to solve is, well, can we use a proof of stake mechanism that doesn't require this gas mechanism so that we can reduce costs? Because right now gas is expensive and sometimes it gets exorbitantly expensive and it just doesn't work. So in answer to the migration issue, I'm really looking forward to being able to migrate. As far as I know, there's going to be a lot of what's working should still be able to work. The idea of using Solidity and all the other stuff should theoretically still be able to work. But we'll see. Is everybody going to automatically go over to ETH 2.0? I don't know. I built EOSIO, not being adopted. It has to do with all sorts of different factors. Is it the better mousetrap? Yeah, it does a lot of things way better than Ethereum, but Ethereum is Disneyland for DeFi right now. And everybody goes there. Well, everybody did until they shut it down. Everybody went there to Disneyland because it is, it's costly, it's crowded, it's hot, and, and it's expensive. But it's got all the stuff that everybody wants to be able to do DeFi. And so that's where people go. And so I'm looking forward to ETH 2.0 solving a lot of those issues. And we all have. I've been waiting for this for years. And so we'll see whether or not people are just ready for it or they'll just move on. I think that it's like everything else. It gets something like Polkadot or EOS or Tezos or any of the other half dozen protocols that are vying for a space here to go into that gap between ETH and ETH 2.0, and people say, ETH 2.0 is still so far off, I'm sorry, I'm abandoning it. The thing that happened with DeFi is it made it almost impossible to do that because everybody jumped into DeFi. Now the Ethereum network is where you go for DeFi. It's like you don't go anywhere else. So it makes it harder to get off the Ethereum thing. That should strengthen people wanting to migrate to Ethereum 2.0 more than abandon it to go to some other protocol that nobody's using yet.
Sure. I mean, on that note, you had before mentioned loyalty to a protocol. Do you feel like y'all have that? I mean, does y'all's project feel a loyalty to Ethereum, or would you be open to migrating to one of these other systems if they became demonstrably better? And Ethereum 2.0 still looks like it's way too far off.
Yes, of course. And we built this because on ERC20 on Ethereum because that's where we felt that was where everybody was interested in participating. Building it on, we already had built blockchain as a service on EOSIO originally, just didn't catch, our stuff caught on, but EOSIO hadn't really caught on. So we're wide open. We'll use other protocols. We're going to support rewards for other protocols, ETH 2.0, Bitcoin. We've been talking with a half dozen other different protocols who don't have rewards for their nodes, who would like to be able to use our layer. So we'll see.
Sure. Yeah, man, I like the answer. I do want to respect your time here, and we're starting to come up on some time. So I have just a last couple sort of reflective questions here for you.
Sure.
It's been a wild year, to say the least.
It's been a wild decade. 2020 has been a ridiculous decade.
Yes. Actually, I think March was March was about 5 years ago. So that seems right. What do you think has been the most important moment or the most important aspect for crypto and blockchain that comes out of 2020, and where do you see things going forward?
For crypto and blockchain, I think that the real big thing that happened was there was at the start of the year, and I'll use this for microcosm and macrocosm. At the start of the year, there was an expectation that enterprise blockchain was going to be, the year 2020 was going to be the year of enterprise blockchain. we had a whole bunch of different very large clients that we were going to start engaging with, that we were ready to go with. And that we not only got shut down with some of those where they couldn't proceed, we still have plenty of clients, but we also saw that happen in general across the board. And until, I would say, DeFi started coming out, I would say until this whole group of things that happened, Comp went live with its token in June. And Andre came out with Yearn Finance, and a couple of those things happened around that same time, and that was a huge, huge change. And I think that was the thing that set the focus as, oh, there is a killer app for blockchain, and it turns out to be finance, things that people could easily participate in, which we've all been looking for.
Yeah,
and so
who'd have thought, right? Finance.
So finance. So that turned out to be the really big thing. The fact that Bitcoin is up or whatever, that's less relevant. I think that people have now focused on, well, gee, DeFi. And so I think that will evolve into other things. But I think that was the big moment of 2020 was DeFi took off.
Sure. And what do you think the State of the Union will be? The State of the Union will be in 2021. Like, how do you see the shape of the space evolving from here?
I see that people will be moving more into, I know what we're going to be moving into, which is a kind of an ecosystem of multiple different kinds of tokens that do have different functions to do different things. But I think a lot of this is going to revolve around finance in some way. I do see that people will start looking at how they can adopt DeFi into their ecosystems and be able to do the financial transactions. And people will start embracing cryptocurrency as, well, guess what, a currency. That's the thing I'm really seeing in 2021, is I think that we'll start seeing the year when it's no longer this ridiculously regulated thing, and it's something that you're able to easily do with a lot of different kinds of transactions, and the costs for those transactions will go down. And it's just, I think I'm really looking forward to that. I think DeFi will really help fuel that.
Well put. I too am hopeful, my friend. David Moss, CEO and founder of StrongBlock. You're a really cool guy, man. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to
Oh, no, this is great.
chat
I
with
wish we could talk more. We were talking about Kant and all sorts of other things before we got down to the conversation. Whole other time. Let's get together and do that sometime soon.
Whole other time. Yeah, man, I am definitely up for that. You know, we will be in touch with you, especially to let you know when this is going to air. You know, we'll tweet at y'all. We'll sort of send an email. And yeah, anytime you want to get back on, just reach out to us, and I'm more than happy to chat again.
It was a pleasure, Tyler. I really appreciate your time as well.
All right, David. And for everybody watching, stay tuned to Reimagine 2020, and happy HODL days.